Hey everyone, Lee Jandro with Positive News for You and president of PN4U Inc., which is our 501c3 nonprofit. I want to take some time to update you on a lot of cool things that are happening with both our for-profit Positive News for You and our nonprofit. Some of you know me. You've known that I began this company in 2017, and we've continued. We've never missed a day of newsletters. We've never missed a day of getting up special stories that have to do with the positive things that are going on in the world. We developed a lot of merchandise to accompany that, and most recently, we began to add a program at PN4U Inc. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a few moments. So, positive news for you. One of the things that I felt like in 2017 was there was just a lot of things that were going on in the world. Here we are 7 years later. There's even more, and there's a lot of division that's come into the world and things like that. Some of that division is driven by the news itself, the media, whatever. This isn't a political statement. This is just an observation. One of the things about being nearly 70 years old is I've had a lot of time to ponder these things and think about the circumstances that have come into our lives and how they affect each and every one of us. Excuse me. So, with positive news for you, I made the decision in 2017 that each day I would put together a group of stories that reached out into the community and throughout the nation. Occasionally, you'll see international stories in there, but oftentimes I don't use those. And when I do, they're usually connected to medical breakthroughs, technological breakthroughs, that kind of thing. So with doing that, what I ended up with, I found a lot of communities and things. I found children and older people and everybody in between that are doing really, really cool things. Most recently, I was just reading a story about a woman who's in our neck of the woods up here in Keene, New Hampshire, and she goes out and she meets with the homeless, and there, she goes out and we had a big snowstorm, not a big one, but a snowstorm the other day, and we're looking at a fairly sizable snowstorm today coming in this evening, and that storm is supposed to drop 7 to 10 inches of snow. So a lot of the resources that are available for people who are homeless, unhoused, whatever words we use to describe them, what we're finding is there's just not a lot of room to go around. And some of these people, of course, we all know are never going to want to come into a building, etc., that kind of thing. So I was reading, I've read with interest, what she does. She finds backpacks and clothing and all these kind of things, and she literally goes out into the woods and sits with some of these people and meets with them. And there's a couple of other groups that are doing similar things. And I think that one of the things that I like to tell people, it's not about who the people are that are being ministered to or taken care of, but it's the people who are actually deciding that they're going to do something to make their communities better and for everyone. And so that's just a simple example. Over the years, I've watched them, I've watched new projects go together where they've worked with veterans and things like that. Most recently, I was watching a veterans program that's happening out in the state of Texas and things like that. And I look at those things and I say, people really do get it. It's not about an individual. Sometimes it's that's the person who's the fire starter. When I started our company, there was only one other positive news resource that was out there. And I don't feel like I'm in competition with anybody. We pay money to make sure our SEO is going well. We have 5,500 pages of stories and things like that. But I'm not in competition with those people. As a matter of fact, I'll share their stories because when the river rises, all the boats float. And what do I mean by that? When somebody's doing something positive and somebody sees it and does something similar, what we end up with an effect that begins to change whole communities and that kind of thing. So, in our own community, some folks know I am a minister of a local fellowship. This month, and it's probably going to be every month, but this month I put together a group of prayers. Whether it's been, one day it might be for the leadership, and one day it might be for students. I think today's has to do with students and children and things like that. And there's things that we can do. It's not just about saying, hey, we're praying for you, we're sending you best wishes, but it's actually getting involved. So I want to veer off that for just a moment. In the last couple of weeks, about a year and a half ago, I decided that I was going to put together stories related to individual states. Obviously, there's 50 states in the union, and so I began with my home state of Keene, and I began to put together stories. And what I began to do is put together stories that promoted these states and things like that. So I began with positive news happening in such and such a state. So for instance, it would be, the title wasn't exactly this, but it would say, we have positive news coming from you for you from the state of New Hampshire. And so I'd put together the things that are on technological breakthroughs, perhaps medical breakthroughs. How do they handle, the education? What are some of the things that are changing? And as of about a week and a half ago, I completed every single state in the union. So, you know, I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm going to revitalize those stories as I go forward. But each week, what I would do is I would put up a positive news story related to a particular state and the things that were going on in that. I would mention some of the services that are there, or the technology breakthroughs that they're making, or whatever those things are. What's cool in some of the communities and stuff like that. I talk about some of the geographical, uh, the resources, the natural resources of the state itself. Big mountains, no mountains, desert, whatever that kind of thing is. And I love doing that. I'm a history buff, and I just like telling those stories. I also completed the one that had to do with weddings. And so my daughter was an event planner down in the Boston area, and I decided that I wanted to do something that would promote um, the state. So whether it would be the state of New Hampshire or the state of Massachusetts, uh, what I would do is I would put together those things, and in it I would have, great places to be married in that individual state, venues that might be available, caterers, florists, all those kind of things that make a wedding better, as and including I would put in fun things to do while you're there. And so I just completed the wedding one, and I also did one on wines and wineries throughout the United States. If you were to go to our business directory, you would find that we have literally thousands and thousands of wineries that are in there. And you would find that I put together stories on the individual wines. We had a sponsor who was a winery, and I took all their wines and I took all their, so you had, like, you know, the Rieslings and, Chardonnays and all that. And I wrote individual stories, but then I did it on the states. So every state in the union has a list of, wine country, their wine offerings, the wineries that are available, things to do when you're there. I put together in some of those, there's itineraries you'll find. And I replicated that as well in the area of beer, brews, and breweries. And so what you'll find is there's every week we came out with a story on, again, very similar to the wines. I did a bunch of beers and things like that. I did probably 20, 30 beers. And then not so much a beer made by a manufacturer or a brewer, but a beer, like it might have been a lager beer or a stout beer or whatever that kind of thing is. So I put together all that. My hope and my heart still continues to be that, in the area of, say the winery or the brewery, that I'm going to draw in some people who will be interested in doing stories related to, area wherever they live, brews and breweries and things like that, give you firsthand tasting results and things like that. So like I said, we had the positive news stories about the states, we had the weddings, we had the wineries and the breweries, and I, about 6 months ago, began to do foods of each and every state. So, if it was pizza from, there might be find pizza in, say, a New York State one or a Chicago, area or something like that in the state of Illinois. So I began to put all those together. And again, very similar, some famous places. What are some fun stories about pizza? Maybe it was invented by a mobster or something like that, that kind of fun stuff. So you'll find all that, I didn't just put it together, hey, go buy pizza. So I did the foods and I did a separate one for pizzas. And that began when I was doing Pepe's and New Haven, Worcester pizza. I was down there and I grew up on Pepe's. When I was a child, my parents used to take us to Pepe's, Worcester Square. And Worcester Square, New Haven pizza is a culture all by itself. So anyways, I did a story on Pepe's and things like that, and I had a lot of people who not only have read it, but Pepe's themselves participated. And a friend of mine, his mom used to live upstairs in the building, so there's a fun little story about that. And on their big anniversary, he had like this gold-plated pizza cutter. So I like putting together those things that are historical, and and in addition to all those, we do a lot related to finance and things like that. And we always look for people, not just for sponsors and things like that, but people who are interested in writing stories about those things. You know, maybe you're a mortgage broker, or maybe you're a financier, banker, and you want to do things and you want to get your company involved in that. So the most recent undertakings, I've gone back to my roots a little bit, and I've started to put together stories that are related to the idea of uh, positive things. How do you make your, like I did one, gratitude for me is my starting place. If I'm not grateful, I find it very hard to maintain a positive attitude about anything. So I have to work on my own attitude because of what I do and how I do it, meaning, culling through, tons and tons of news sites. I mean, sometimes they're radio news sites and sometimes they're newspaper news sites and sometimes they're magazines. But I find something that, is positive and helps people, has the ability to help people. And one of the reasons I do those stories is not just to give people an alternative, meaning positive news to the negative news stories, but I like to see people go, wow, I could do that. That's something I could do. And so for years I've wanted, my mom was a teacher, and she was an educator for 30 plus years, and I wanted to do something that because I believe positivity and resilience can be taught. And so what I find is that people, they read the stories, and sometimes I get it, people only read headlines a lot of the time, and that makes it tough for many people. But you know they read the story and they go, oh, that's really cool, medical breakthrough, so and so, somebody rescued, from a car. Most recently we're seeing a lot of them, where people have been being rescued from falling through the ice, and stuff like that. So I try to put up a lot of that stuff, maybe there's a new show going on, and that kind of thing. um and then on a daily basis, I'll take a story of the day, not a story, but a celebration of a day, and things like, obviously, for many of us, we know that tomorrow is the Super Bowl. So tomorrow, I put in some stuff about the Super Bowl. So not only are you going to get stuff about, positive news stories, but you're going to get a daily quote of the day. We have crossword puzzle every day, a new one appears. But you also find stuff on the Super Bowl, and sometimes it's another day. Like one of our popular ones last week was take your dog. I forget what they exactly called it, but it was take your dog on a date night kind of thing, and people love that. It just opened the doors for conversations and things like that. And so I certainly don't have it all figured out, but I do know that, thousands and thousands of people are interested in changing things. And so back to the education piece, what I've tried to show people is we can develop techniques that make our lives better, more positive. It's not just about, doing something every day or avoiding toxic people or circumstances and things like that, but what is it I can do today to make my day better? And I talk about that a lot. That one of my priorities is I have to have my head screwed on straight before I have the ability to do things. So in the search for positive news stories, I have to weed through a lot of the garbage ones. They're not garbage stories so much as they're just negative stories. Let's be real, you know. So I try to find the stories, and I try to make sure that my head stays on properly, and that I'm in tune with what I'm saying, and I'm not just throwing stuff out there for the sake of throwing stuff out there. So my mom was an educator. I love the educational process. For those of you who have followed me for a few years, you know that I homeschooled my children for a bit in the early years, and most recently, for the last 4 years, I've been homeschooling my nearly 18-year-old grandson. And so he spends the majority of his time here, and he does online school, you know, a school that he actually found, and he's had an interest. His grade average has gone up exponentially. His security about who he is, his understanding of process, you know, it's brought up questions about what are we being taught? Why are we being taught this? What is the meaning of this? You know, so I'm really proud of him because he made that step. It's taken a lot of work, not just on his side of things. I don't know if he thought the school was going to be easier, but what he found was this particular online school is considerably harder than anything he encountered in public school. And, you know, part of that decision process came out of COVID. If you go to our website, you know, positivenewsforyou.com, you can read some of those stories, including, you know, some of his own writing about why this has been a good choice for him. And that, you know, so when I started the company, I started the for-profit Positive News for You. And then I decided that I wanted to do more, and I started a nonprofit, a 501(c)(3), complete with board members, registered with the IRS, able to take donations, and leap buildings in a single. I'm just kidding. Um, so we were able to do that. You know, we started that, and one of the pieces of that was I wanted to develop an education, uh, not even an education. I wanted to be able to educate young people on how to be more positive. Um, you know, I wanted to undergird the idea that people could become inventors, and they could be innovators, and they could be pioneers. You know, in my generation, we grew up, and I'm not saying everybody, but many people, you know, we looked at the astronauts and we wanted to be an astronaut, or we wanted to fly a jet, or, you know, we wanted to backpack, you know, through Southeast Asia or something like that. You know, for me, I tell my grandson, I go, yeah, had my motorcycle for a week, and took off to see this friend of mine out in the middle of, you know, like 7 hours away on my motorcycle. Just got up one morning and said, you know, this is the day I'm going to see my friend. Called her up, said, I'm coming to visit you. Drove all the way out there, you know. Didn't even think twice about that pioneering piece, you know, driving on roads I had never been with. What's it going to be like to have a motorcycle when you pull up to a toll booth? All those things I never thought of. Like I say, I was 16 years old. And, you know, I want to see that instilled. So a friend of mine who I reached out to many, many years ago, um, and we talked about this process. What you know, he said, I would like to do something with this, and then through a series of events, it didn't happen. You know, I look at children, you know, like I look at young people, and I look at the things they do, and, you know, I see kids reading, but not reading a lot sometimes, and see kids drawing, and they want to engage in art and sports and things like that. And I want to see each of these children uncover, if you will, their superpower. Um, think one of the superpowers that we don't like to talk about is positivity. Positivity doesn't mean I'm always going to be happy. I recently lost my brother-in-law passed away. I have another brother-in-law who's in hospice. I've watched difficult things happen in our family. I've watched people go through really, really tough times. I mean, I can tell you in 2008, you know, my house was wrecked, and I tried to repair it for 5 years and get it restored from storms and contractor, just a whole bunch of things. And I needed to walk through that. You know, buying an RV so I can be on the property, and in the winter I'm renting places and doing all that. And I wasn't happy about it. I'm not going to lie. I had to work out what does it take to be grateful. But what I had to do was I had to look at every circumstance and look for the gold, if you will. Look into that situation and believe that I could overcome that piece. And so my friend developed a curriculum for K through 12, kindergarten through 12th graders, and he's in the process of developing an additional program that has to do with adults. And I talk about these things a lot. I believe we can teach this particular curriculum. It has to do with positivity and resilience. And so I believe we can teach those things. I think everything we do in life is like bricks. I talk about Legos and things like that. Imagine building a tower. What is the tower you want to accomplish in your life? And so every small victory counts. So, how do we help children to see victory in their life as they grow older? Again, the curriculum my friend Phil developed, that's his name, Phil Lauer, developed, helps children develop a resilience and see that, yep, yesterday I failed at some things, but today I'm good. That kind of thing. We want to help children help and support one another, and begin to teach them how to tackle things. One of the things I've talked to my grandson a lot. Some people have a natural inertia, if you will, or a momentum. Other people have to develop it. In leadership schools that I've taught and been part of, they say that there's probably only about 7% of all leaders are natural leaders. The rest are learned skills. And so what are the skills we want to teach people? We know the story about how many times Michael Jordan missed his free throws, or we know how many times somebody swung a bat. We hear the stories about the thousands and thousands of experiments that Edison did before the invention of the light bulb. And like, we want to teach people that it's not one and done. So if you've made it this far and you're watching this, I love what I do. And I invite others to join us, to join us. We don't have a paid model. If somebody's a writer or a videographer or things, we have shared models. If they bring sponsors to the table, we have shared models that bring finances in. We're always looking for sponsors. Particularly in this program that we're developing, we're looking for sponsors and donors who might want to see these programs in their schools. We have begun a process of grant writing, but let me just tell you, that takes a very long time. um, it takes a long time. And so we want to change the world. And we know that we can't change the world by ourselves. And so I, as the owner of Positive News for You and the president of PN4UINC, I invite you to consider how you might participate with us. I'm always looking for people who trumpet the good in a community. I call them town criers. That word doesn't mean what it did in my generation, but there were people that would go around and shout out the things that are going well. I always look for people who are ambassadors for the good and the good things. There's people that have a heart for children. There's people that have a similar heart for a different age group or a different group of people, and things. And there's room at the table for everyone. So I just invite you to consider joining us and spend some time. Go to our website, Positive News for You. Go to our Facebook page. Again, it's Positive News for You. We have a Facebook group that's very similar and things like that where people participate. Consider joining us. Let's make the world a better place. Let's not get caught up in what's not working. Let's begin to be the solution bringers to the problems that already do exist. So thanks for spending this time with me, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you for watching this. You may be watching this on Facebook. You may be watching it on our YouTube channel. Share some of this stuff with people, with your friends and family. Like I say, we know that we can't do it all. So thanks. Have a great weekend. For us, we're getting ready for a big snowstorm, so I'm excited. So bye bye now.